The impact of theology and advocacy in action, the examples of Laudato Si and Mizan. My name is Professor Husna Ahmed, and I'm the CEO of Global One 2015, a UK-based international NGO. And I'm also a professor at two universities in the UK, Birmingham and UCL London, University College London. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you all here. Good morning, everyone. It's my honor to welcome you to the important breakout session. Ubuntu in Action Focus on Vulnerable Communities is the theme of this Interfaith Forum. We're gathering today in Cape Town, South Africa. First time that I've visited this beautiful country and beautiful city, so I'm so happy to be here. It's a place rich in both spiritual resilience and historical struggles. We're here to explore how faith, theology, and advocacy come together to respond to one of the most urgent challenges of our time, the triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Faith traditions across the world have long taught us that caring for the earth is not optional. It's a sacred duty. Whether it's Laudato Si, with its call to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, or Mizan, an Islamic theological reflection on the balance and harmony of creation. Both frameworks call on believers to act ethically, urgently, and collectively. This theology is not just theory. It inspires faith actors around the world to lead on climate, often in places where governments or markets have failed. Let us not forget that climate change is not just environmental. It is deeply political and profoundly human. For example, the carbon footprint of the first 15 months of Israel's war on Gaza will be greater than the annual planet warming emissions of 100 individual countries. This dark statistic proves that climate change is worsened by political regimes and human greed. In Africa and other parts of the world, the climate crisis is entangled with conflict, displacement, food insecurity, and inequality. In Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Ethiopia, the climate crisis is not just environmental, it's deeply political and human. In Sudan, over half of the population, some 25 million people, are enduring acute food insecurity, with catastrophic famine conditions declared in multiple camps and regions. Children are especially vulnerable, with 3.2 million under 5-year-olds projected to suffer severe malnutrition. The crisis is worsening amid ongoing conflict, displacement, and climate shocks, with agriculture collapsing 80% below average cereal production in some regions and funding for aid dwindling. Across the DRC, an estimated 27.7 million people, nearly a quarter of the population, face acute hunger, including 3.9 million in emergency. So, faith-based women and youth are not only advocating, they are innovating, mediating, and leading. For example, the first ever Africa Women of Faith conference in Ethiopia brought together women, faith leaders from across Africa with an aim of enabling them to bridge the gap between policymakers and their daily practice. The women of faith through the conference strengthened mutual cooperation and promoted interfaith action and gender equality through dialogue. So what I just would like to do now is introduce people who are experts, who are passionate, who, many of them are dear friends, and some of them are new friends, and I hope our friendships will grow as time goes on. We're privileged to be joined by this diverse group, and I'm delighted that we have so many women on this panel, unlike some of the plenaries that we've had. So Azmaira Alibai, welcome. She's the Faith and Ecosystems Coordinator at UNEP in Nairobi. Dr. Mohammed Al-Sanusi of the Network of Religious and Traditional Peacemakers. Grace Chilongo, Director of Youth Empowerment and Environmental Management, YIM. Emmanuel Mwendwa Kilu, Thematic Facilitator of the Eco-Faith Working Group in the Children and Youth Major Group to UNEP. Mushra Hartley, Yeah, that's Mushra, Global Operations Manager at the International Emission Trading Association, and Marilyn Chitharai from Religions for Peace. So each brings critical perspectives on how theology is translating into real-world advocacy and policy influence. So what I'd like to do is, introduce each of them properly and give each of you 5 minutes to speak. Asmara will give the grounding and theological perspective, and then we'll start the ball rolling. So Asmara, as I said, she's the UNEP's Ecosystems Coordinator. And what she's doing is she's supporting management of the Faith for Earth Coalition, which many of us are a part of, strategic partnerships and engagement across the UN systems, including UNFFC. And in her downtime, if you have any, she volunteers and manages an environment portfolio of the Aga Khan Youth Board for Kenya, Burundi, Rwanda, and South Africa, focused on sustainable lifestyles, Islam, and the environment. So my first question to you, Asmara, is in what way has the theological teachings from Laudato Si and Mizan inspired climate action in faith communities? Does interfaith work strengthen or challenge the theological case for climate progress? You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
The microphone. Yes, you need that.
Thank you very much. Just confirming everybody can hear me all the way at the back. Okay, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And to be part of this very distinguished panel with voices from across the environment and climate movement. I'll begin by reading the very first paragraph, the opening statement in both Laudato Si, Care for Our Common Home, and Mizan, A Covenant for the Earth. We'll begin with Laudato Si. It states, Laudato Si, mi Signore, praise be to you, my Lord. In the words of this beautiful canticle, Saint Francis of Assisi reminds us that our common home is like a sister, with whom we share our life, and a beautiful mother who opens her arms to embrace us. Praise be to you, my Lord, through our sister, Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us, and who produces various fruit with colored flowers and herbs. Similarly, the opening statement in Mizan reads, we begin with grateful praise to God, the Lord of all beings, to the number of stars in the sky, the grains of the sands, the waves of the waters, the drops of the rains, the leaves of the trees, and all things throughout the heavens and the earth. I begin with these two opening statements because we often forget to show our gratitude for Mother Earth, for our planet that sustains us. And I think it's important to think about our own journey here today, for the last month. How many times have you acknowledged, and this is by no means a criticism, but just how systematic our disassociation, our apathy for the earth it leaves us today, in spite of the life-giving support that it gives us. Now, to Dr. Husna's question, and I'll remind you, in what ways has the theological teachings from Laudato Si and Mizan inspired climate action? There are several. I'll highlight the most important is that both play a very pivotal role in shaping how faith communities, faith institutions, and leaders across the globe engage with the climate crisis. Both offer a robust theological framework that is grounded in environmental concern, as well as the concern of the person. It doesn't only look at politics or economics, but also our divine and moral responsibility to act on the issues that we deem important. Laudato Si, for example, emphasizes on integral ecology. It looks at the interconnectedness of the environmental, the social, and the spiritual crises that we face today. It is a holistic response, I think, to both climate justice and human dignity. To read a passage, we can be silent witnesses to terrible injustices if we think that we can obtain significant benefits by making the rest of humanity, present and future, pay the extremely high cost of environmental deterioration. there is an inseparable bond between the concern for nature, for justice, for the poor, our commitment to society, and for interior peace. It highlights a moral urgency. Similarly, Al-Mizan speaks about the balance, which is what Al-Mizan means, and harmony. It draws from Quranic principles, speaking about the idea of Mizan, speaking about specifically environmental degradation as well as a force of disrupting divine order. It provides a clear scriptural basis for ecological responsibility in Islam. And to read the passage that the name is derived from, and the sky, he, God, raised it, and he set upon the balance, so that you may not exceed the balance. Weigh with justice and do not fall short in the balance. And the earth he has spread out for all living creatures. There's a strong emphasis on human stewardship. Our role as Khalifas, our responsibility to act when we see injustice to our earth and to our fellow human. So both of them are reflective, I think, of a very close relationship, as we see in indigenous and spiritual traditions, placing an emphasis on the work that we do, enabling us as people of faith and of moral conviction to communicate that obligation with the rest of the world, so that we find community sharing our spiritual beliefs for greater environmental action, coupled with the power that faith communities have in economics, in politics, in education. How do we bring in this unique voice to uplift these actions? Now, that was a very broad and a very short introduction to both Al-Mizan and Laudato Si, and I implore all of you, please do read both of these very important texts to help you in your journey in this work that we do for our common home.
Thank you so much, Asmira. I think you've captured very succinctly what the sort of theological grounding is. And, for me, whether it's Islam or Christianity, all the other great faiths, the environment and the care for nature and Khalifa stewardship, this is something that's been there for thousands of years. And yet we, as on this planet today, have forgotten so much. So these are fantastic reminders and bringing the sacred and the spiritual to the fore. So really grateful for that. If I can ask Grace to come in here now. Grace Chilongo, as I said, is the Director of Youth Empowerment and Environmental Management, YEEM, and she's also the URI representative here. You're a dedicated citizen science and environmental research specialist, passionate about integrating science, faith, and community action to address climate and social challenges. And she's the founder, actually, of YEEM, which is an organization advancing climate action, clean energy, adoption, and interfaith harmony through youth-led initiatives in Malawi. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you so much.
So, Grace, my question to you is, what role do women and youth play in rebuilding community resilience in the face of conflict and climate impacts? Because, having the theological grounding is all well and good, but if we don't put this into practice, and, you as a youth and a young woman, I think you're in a good place to advise us on that. Over to you, Grace.
Thank you so much, my fellow panelists. So what I'm going to do today is just to share my own story, my own journey, the word youth empowerment and environmental management. So to me, in the spirit of Ubuntu, but also advocacy and action. For me, when we say Ubuntu, it means, yes, interconnectedness between humanity, but also the environment. I remember when I was studying my university, there was a point when I was going to second semester, I was about to withdraw from school because of school fees. And then I met this other person who introduced it to me to African Park. So African Park, these are the group of that manage the parks in Africa. And then we have one in our community, which is the Wonde National Park. So when I went there to complain about my issue, they said, it's okay, we are going to give you a scholarship, which is a school fees. And then I remember David Nangoma told me one thing. Grace Chirongo, it's not the managers in the African Park, nor the people, but it is the environment. It is the nature that is paying your tuition fee. When I went to school, they were just paying my tuition fee, but they were different people who came in to support me. A person, I cannot be complete on my own. I need people. The people who are regarded like the people who are selfish. We belong to different cultures. We have got the Tumbukas, and then we have got the Achewas. Tumbukas mostly they regarded as the selfish people, but they are the same people who came through for me. They were providing food for me. So Ubuntu, in addition to being connected to one another, it also involves even the people who doesn't belong to my own culture. People, the environment itself, because my tuition fee was paid by environment. As one way of paying back, I started the organization called Youth Empowerment and Environmental Management. The organization which is there to pull different, to pull youth from different backgrounds, from different cultures, from different religions to come together. So literally what we are doing right now is to advocate for environmental change. We are also implementing the projects that have got the emphasis on taking care of our mother nature. For example, we have a sustainable agriculture as a project where we are teaching the local communities on how to grow their crops without relying on fertilizer. We all know that fertilizer has got an impact on nature. In addition to that, we are also teaching people how to produce a clean cook stove. The stoves that rely only to wood. I know we have got more environmentally friendly, but to the local communities, some of them might not be, they cannot afford to purchase them. So we are teaching these skills of producing the clean cook stove that are there to support the environment, but also to support the livelihoods of people. In addition to that, we also conducted peace building education in our community, whereby we are there to sensitize, because most of the conflicts, I remember we had this other conversation, like to inquire from them, what are the challenges that are disturbing peace in your community? And one of it was the issue of the climate change. So wanted to bring people from different backgrounds to come together so that we can solve these issues. That's where all these projects, the ideas were coming from. So our approach is not centered on us as a youth, but we're also engaging the local communities in coming up with their ideas. In addition to that, as a youth, one of the things that we are doing from in EM is also to focus on financial literacy. And we have started the project of beans to have only finances that we can also reach out to the other people. So we are growing the beans so that we should sell them and earn money and support somebody who is in need. I know we do application for the funding, but until when are we going to rely on funding? So as a youth, we have introduced that so that on our own we should also be financially equipped. But while we are focusing on financial, we should also be mindful of the environment. That's why our approaches are environmentally friendly. Thank you so much.
Wow, Grace, passion, energy, vibrancy. My goodness, this is exactly what we need. And I love the way that you're actually talking about dignity, because the holistic approach that you have brought in through YIM is very much looking at how we can have dignity for youth, women, communities. And I think that is what's essential, not waiting for handouts, trying to be independent and trying to be, able to support your community. You're talking about the community that helped you, which wasn't your community. From the Islamic perspective, we have to help neighbors to our right and to our left. 40 families each, minimum. So, helping communities through different nations also, I think is essential. So I think, the community that helped and supported you, mentored you, I think they did a wonderful job, and I'm really grateful to have you here with us today. So if I can pass on to my dear brother, who doesn't really need, he's, an outstanding leader in the interfaith space and peace-building space. Dr. Mohammed El-Sanusi is the Executive Director of the Network for Religions and Traditional Peacemakers, which is a global coalition that connects grassroots peace builders with international stakeholders to strengthen collective efforts towards sustainable peace. He is now also serving as a commissioner on the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, and I think this is a critical role that you have to play to really support the communities throughout the world. So welcome, Brother Mohammed, and thank you for accepting the invitation to speak on this panel. The question that I have for you, the first question, is how can faith-based actors challenge climate narratives that overlook the disproportionate impact on the global south? Over to you.
Well, thank you so much, and good morning to everybody. We're still morning, right? So thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed, for your leadership in putting together this panel and structured the panel quite well. She worked very hard to bring all of us together and to coordinate and create questions and put just a very natural sequence of how this panel will actually happen. So I'm so happy that I heard from Grace, from Mirzira. It's really hard to follow, right? But let me make just few remarks before I turn it to the youth. We want the youth to speak here. Couple of points I want to make. I want to just focus on this idea of no one should be left behind. And that's very important. For us to do the work, we have to work collectively. And that will happen, to fight against climate change. We need to have that notion of no one left behind. Everybody should be around the table. And this could be done through interreligious partnership. We must all work for inclusivity and collective action, recognizing that stewardship of the earth, the khilafah, this notion of khilafah, the stewardship of the earth is both scientific necessity and a moral, spiritual responsibility as well. So every major faith traditions calls for the care of the creation. Yet our current action falls far short of the urgency the climate crisis, right now demands. So this point number one, no one should be left behind. Point number two, we need to do our advocacy through our interfaith collaboration. That's what they call it, advocacy. Interfaith advocacy is essential because it amplifies our moral authority and trust by reaching communities in which science alone may not persuade. This connects directly to the SDG 17 of the United Nations, which is really calling for the strengthening partnership for sustainable development and mobilizing faith communities to inspire change, influence policy, and move hearts. So together, we must bring everyone to the table. Activate the theological foundations that we have from our various religions, and we can act so no one is left behind. Now, having said that, a couple of examples from the role of religious actors addressing climate change, and just pick Africa here and give you a specific example. We at the Peacemakers Network we were supported by the European Union funded project called Toward an Inclusive and Peaceful Society in Mozambique. We call it TIPS. To promote peace and prevent conflict linked to natural resources management in Mozambique. The project aimed to contribute to turning Mozambique's abundant resources into a force for economic growth and peace, rather than a trigger for dispute, division, and conflict. The TIPS project focused on empowering local communities, including religious actors, and providing dialogue between the communities, the government, and private companies. Again, everybody around the table. One participant, Thomas from the project, said he's a religious leader and teacher, participated in this dialogue and in the advocacy training. And after the training, he returned to the district and successfully worked with the local authorities to create a space to replicate the learning. And that's so critical. Now, moving forward quickly, I have just less than a minute. I listed 5 examples for youth engagement in addressing climate change. So I'm not gonna be able to go through all of them, but I wanna just to reaffirm that youth are ready, capable, and already committed to addressing climate change, and it is cascading impact. The question of how to engage youth is twofold. First, we must involve them in ways that ensure meaningful intergenerational collaboration. Second, we need to shift the mindset that it's not solely the role of religious communities to prepare youth to take action. Youth are already on the front lines leading and driving change. And I have put 5 examples. I will gonna mention one, and if we have time, I'll do the 4 in the second round, but the youth will give you more examples. How many of you heard about bye-bye plastic bags? Bye-bye plastic bag, anybody? Bye-bye plastic bags. Anybody heard about it? You did. One person in the audience. Where is it? Which country? Huh? Rwanda. No. Which country youth led this initiative? Bye-bye plastic bags. No, not Africa. No. We have somebody sitting in the audience from that beautiful country. The largest Muslim populations in the world. A country has a largest Muslim population in the world. Indonesia, Bali. Bye-bye plastic bag is a social initiative. Look it up. Driven by youth to get the people of Bali to say no to plastic bag. The founders and sisters, Milati, 15 years old, and Isabel, 13 years old. It started bye-bye plastic bag 3 years ago when they were inspired by a lesson in class about significant people like Nelson Mandela were in his land, Lady Diana, Mahatma Gandhi. They went back home after the class that day and thought, what can we do as children living in Bali? What can we do now? Bye-bye plastic bag was born in 2013 and now has a volunteer team of 25 to 30 students from all schools around Bali, local and international, and has become a well-known international movement of inspiration, youth empowerment, and of course, saying no to plastic bags.
Thank you so much, Brother Mohammed. I think that's one of the takeaways from this. Bye-bye plastic bags. We will need to have that slogan from this I have 20 forum. Yeah, no one left behind. That is something that is very critical, and I'm really glad that you raised that, and you raised the issue of advocacy firmly, that it's not just the youth, but it's for everyone. In the past, people used to say, we need to save the planet for future generations. Now that time is gone. We failed our youth. Honestly, we failed our youth, and the youth are now taking the leadership in their own hands and moving forward. And I'm glad you gave the example of Mozambique. Even you yourself are from Sudan, and I want to give one example from Sudan about the Women Through the Peace for Sudan platform, which have formed over 49 women-led peace and humanitarian networks supported by UN Women. They organize shelter, psychosocial care, aid for displaced families, and mobilize citizens to protest the war, choosing non-violent resistance and grassroots solidarity. It's taken the UN a long time to realize that if they want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, they have to have a whole of community approach to it, and I'm glad that you highlighted those points. Thank you so much, Brother Mohammed. So now we want to go on to, on my right, I've got 3 youth, amazing youth here. I would like to now invite Mushra. Mushra is the only South African that we have. No, we have 2 South Africans here, so that's wonderful. So we have Mushra Hartley, and Mushra is the Global Operations Manager of the International Emissions Trading Association, IETA, which it was established in 1999 and headquartered in Switzerland, and it's a not-for-profit. Musha also helped, and this is what I found was really wonderful, to set up a chapter, and she's the lead for the Women in Carbon South Africa, which is an initiative with chapters in countries worldwide, designed to empower and amplify the voices of women in the carbon industry. Mushra is from here, and in 2012, she won the Young Business Achiever Award, and has over 20 years of experience in diverse industries which span engineering, IT, media, and digital. So I think you bring a different perspective to this conversation, which I think is highly important, and really excited about hearing from you, Mushra. Have you got, if we can pass you this. So the first question that I'd like to ask you is, can you please tell us more about IETA and how the organization supports environmental restoration and sustainable development to address the issues mentioned, that we're discussing today? Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum, shukran, Dr. Husna, for that lovely introduction. So I'd like to open with a representation of IETA, or it's known for short as IETA. We have a membership community of over 300 member companies from all industries and on all continents. The IETA team, which I'm one of, come from 18 different countries across the globe, and we collectively speak over 40 languages. Thus, we are inclusive and diverse in our representation of voices, businesses, faith, and communities. We maintain gender diversity with a balanced representation of male and female team members, and we recognize the value diverse experiences, abilities, and backgrounds bring to the pursuit of our mission. That mission is to advance the Paris Agreement's objectives and establish effective market-based trading systems for greenhouse gas emissions, systems that are robust, fair, open, efficient, accountable, and consistent across national and international boundaries. We have a multitude of working groups, task forces, and special initiatives. There are jurisdictional working groups. There are also thematic working groups like voluntary carbon markets, aviation, digital, as well as special initiatives like the Business Partnership for Market Implementation and the South African Carbon Market Forum. We also host global summits across Latin America, North America, EU, and Asia, and are looking to add an African summit next year. We play a significant role in the global climate change dialogue by promoting market-based solutions to environmental challenges. We bring together businesses, governments, non-governmental organizations to foster cooperation and innovation in addressing climate change. As Dr. Mohammed said, everyone around the table. We do this in a multitude of ways. I'll focus on 6. So we advocate for carbon markets, including the Paris Agreement and Article 6. We create collaborative frameworks, including everyone around the table. We engage in capacity building and education. We integrate social justice. We promote the development of innovative technologies that can enhance sustainability and reduce emissions. I'd like to touch on the most important, advocating for developing nations in line with the theme of Ubuntu and focusing on vulnerable communities. We recognize the vulnerability of marginalized communities. IATA emphasizes the need for equitable climate solutions. The Paris Agreement incorporates the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, acknowledging that all nations have a responsibility to address climate change, but that their actions should be tailored to their specific circumstances. By integrating economic, social, and environmental dimensions in its approach, IATA advocates for a more balanced and equitable future for both the planet and its inhabitants. Successful carbon markets have social benefits. They create jobs, they develop skills, they build tech communities, and are immensely valuable in supporting vulnerable communities and for achieving UN SDGs. To reference the Archbishop's speech yesterday, where he stated, "History will judge us by the quality, impact, and effectiveness of the solutions we provide." IATA exists to facilitate and develop some of those solutions.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mushra. You've been able to give us a concrete example of an organization that's working on decarbonisation. And in terms of the breadth of work that you're doing around capacity building, integrating social justice and advocating for developing nations, I think these are critical, particularly from a South African and a global South perspective. I think these are things that we really need to start looking at. So if I can now introduce the next person, Emmanuel Wendwa Kilu is a thematic facilitator of the Eco-Faith Working Group in the Children and Youth Major Group at UNEP, United Nations Environment Programme. His areas of expertise and research focus on peace, conflict, and security, with a strong emphasis on how these issues intersect with faith and environmental concerns. He's particularly passionate about exploring the role of young people of faith in advancing environmental sustainability, promoting interfaith dialogue, and contributing to peace building both at policy level and within local communities. Welcome, Emmanuel. So my first question to you, Emmanuel, is what inspires young people of faith to take action on the climate crisis today? Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, moderator. So what inspires the young people of faith, it's the belief and the caring of creation is a sacred duty from the various teachings that young people read from their various faith traditions, which embed that earth is sacred and it's seen as a divine gift that is entrusted by God to people, and young people are among the congregation in the various faith traditions. And through this, it's seen as a way of gratitude and stewardship, where young people have a moral and ethical duty to take care of the earth. So through this inspiration, which is at the core of everything that inspires the young people. The other one is about the environment impacts some of the young people have been able to see and also maybe been affected in one way or another. And now this, with both of them, when intertwined, it inspires young people to respond to environment issues. This can be from the three major issues, the three triple planetary crises. We have climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And for instance, the tangible example how after young people see how issues, for example, the climate change is affecting their society, and in a way on responding, and in a way on highlighting and showcasing on ways on how they are responding, and also to show various stakeholders that they are doing something. For instance, in the UNEP Faith for Earth Coalition Youth Council, the young people have come up with an ongoing survey. It's called the Language of Our Generational Challenge, and it's a global storytelling initiative. And the aim of this is going to amplify the voices of the young people of faith who are already engaged in climate advocacy. And this is going to be a great opportunity for them to share their faith-inspired vision for a just and sustainable future. And they are going to showcase their climate action journey. And the story is going to be featured in an interactive story map highlighting how the advocacy efforts and key messages to other young people of faith, and also to inspire them. And this is the way in how young people, they are being inspired, and in that inspiration they are doing something tangible to ensure that their voice is heard outside there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. And I'm really excited about UNEA 7 in December that's taking place in Nairobi, and excited to see what the Youth Council participants, because I think the leadership of the Youth Council at UNEP has been amazing, and I'm delighted that you joined us today. And thank you for your contribution now. So last but not least, we have Marilyn Chitharai. Did I pronounce it right? And she's also another Cape Town. Do you call it Cape Townian, or what would you call it yourself?
No, I'm from Durban.
From Durban. Oh, okay. So you're from Durban, but you're from South Africa. Okay, brilliant. So she's the youth coordinator and professional architectural technologist, and also Religions for Peace South Africa and African Council of Religious Leaders South Africa. Marilyn's Durban-based spiritual eco-activist, deeply committed to advancing ecological justice and social transformation through faith-based engagement. You hold leadership roles with Religions for Peace, the African Council of Religious Leaders, Bhakti Marga, and the Interfaith Youth Initiatives, where she works to empower young people and foster dialogue across spiritual traditions. In 2019, she was awarded the Innovative Youth Prize and went on to create the Religions for Peace Interfaith Youth Climate Forum. Absolutely delighted to have you with us. So what I'd like to do is just ask you, in many places, women bear the brunt of climate-related hardship. How can faith leaders ensure their voices are not just heard, but acted on?
Thank you so much. So I think I'd like to answer that question by sharing my life story. So I stay in Durban. I stay in a marginalized Indian community, and we've actually faced the brunt of many hardships. First being, we've had 2 floods where 400 people died in KZN. There was the tornado that hit the Tongat community where 2,000 people were displaced. And we also had the brunt of COVID, and we've had the brunt of an unrest, riots that were started by with political agendas. And so the riots also caused a division between Indians and Africans, between the Indian community and the surrounding townships. So because I was awarded in 2019 the Innovative Youth Peace Prize, and that gave me empowerment. Being someone with no funding, it was Religions for Peace that put this prize out, and I won $5,000. So with that, I managed to create and design a program which I implemented in my community to address these issues. And it went over 5 years because COVID stopped it along the way. But we did over 60 activities. 20 of those activities were school programs. And so I want to share about that because how I designed the program was based from my religion and teachings. And one was called Loka Sangraha, which is mean doing actions for the benefit and the welfare of society. And the other one was Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which means the world is one family. And my favorite quotation is by Mahatma Gandhi, where he says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." So how do you be the change you wish to see in the world? And it's action that drives us to hope. So all my activities were based on action and grassroots movements to mobilize the community towards this peace building, but to address climate change issues and to empower youth leadership. So to go into the 6 strategies very quickly, is the first one I focused on was education. So we used the Religions for Peace Climate Resource Guide, which has all the teachings from all religions, the theological aspects, and that was part of our, integrated in our program to infiltrate the school systems that is currently to make it a different way of engaging. And so what we did was we had theological principles in relation to the earth and how to practice this interfaith unity. I conducted workshops, train-the-trainer workshops with educators where they could take these programs and implement it in their schools. It was social media workshops. It was also workshops centered on how to create that connection to the earth. So understanding that we are interconnected, we are spiritual beings, and also we need to develop an eco-consciousness. So part of it also included meditation, which we had an earth meditation. And this was also to create a climate positivity, because it's easy to be despondent. It's easy to sit and look at the challenges in your life. It's easy to see climate change or tornadoes coming, displacement, homes destroyed. But what can you do to create that change, right? So with this funding, I was able to also have programs on food security, where we did organic food gardens in 20 schools. And it also was to empower the community. These kids do not get much food, so they grow their own vegetables, and the vegetable gardens also is for the community. So in Komashu, like we would go into the rural areas, teamed up with a lot of other organizations, and we had planting, we had programs, and also to educate, to promote certain specific plants, like the speckboom, which takes up 99% of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, the vetiver grass, which is a local engineering grass that can actually retain soil and mudslides. So it was promoting specific kind of education to kids and to the community to empower them. The other one was youth leadership, to create that positivity for climate change. Then we also looked at the multi-faith intergenerational approach and social media networking. And with the multi-faith intergenerational approach was in being inclusive. So it was bringing faith organizations together, climate activist organizations, including faith leaders, including everyone. So no one's out of the space. And we would have programs together that incorporated everybody. So in that way, the 2 generations are speaking across to each other. It's just not one generation. And together, by doing that, we have better solutions. But also it's to create that dialogue, which was integrated in our programs. But we had things where we did together as fun. I mean, we had Africa Mamas and Gogos, you know, we did composting workshops. We planted together, we created our compost. And it was such a beautiful space to be in, because not only was it collaborative, but it was, I don't know better than you. I'm here to learn as well. It was a 2-way exchanging program where even though you're a mama and a gogo in your community, you have experience, you know what you're working with in your community. Bring that experience and let's be together. And so from that side, I could provide the support to the program with that funding. And if I didn't have that funding, I couldn't do it. I could use that funding to bring youth from marginalized rural areas to the workshop. I could use that funding to give transport to certain people who didn't have money. I used that funding to provide food to the community. All our food were vegan. It was collaborative, you know, being in line with the earth. I could use that money in so many ways. That's why, like, you know, they say Indian people, we make money go a long way. It was one of those cases, because I still have some funding left, and I'm still wanting to do a last few educational festival, awareness festival for kids, you know. So I think money is such a big resource. When you have that means and that grant or that prize and that funding, you can do a lot, but it's also being responsible and how you use that money. And you make it go a long way, you affect so many lives, but you can create such a bigger movement. Yeah, so thank you.
so much, Marilyn. That was a wonderful example of youth in action, basically. And I have to say, it's not just Indians. I think in terms of civil society, we're able to really stretch the money a long way. So, I think, you've given a wonderful example, and you've shown people getting their hands dirty and really, supporting the environment in so many ways. What I'd like to do is, rather than ask questions from myself to the panel, I'd like to spend 5 minutes asking the audience if they have any questions for the panel first, and then we'll give you another chance in a bit. Is that okay? If we can have any hands raised for questions. There's a gentleman at the back. Okay, Scott. If you can introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Dewo Mahalanyani. I would like to acknowledge this setting or breakaway room for the diversity that we see. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to ask through you, Prof, maybe you'll challenge one of the speakers. The term Ubuntu in our African context speaks of humility, and it comes with that thing of being calm and saying, yes, we cannot fight fire with fire. We always need to find common ground and move well. Where else there's a story that theologians talk of where one of the faith leaders, Christ, got into a temple, there were loan sharks, and kicked things. He was not humble about it. Now, don't we think that this term, Ubuntu, creates a problem for us? Because I'm thinking former Archbishop Tutu says that they gave us the Bible and they took the land. And because of Ubuntu, it was okay. Now, the issue that was discussed on Monday on the debt that we are in. Countries, especially from the global north, have good resources. They have built their economies based on natural resources coming from here in Africa. But there's nothing that we are doing. In my country, especially post-1994, there's always been, hey, it's Ubuntu, it's okay. They left with it, let us rebuild. The economy will build it because of the term Ubuntu, humility. Doesn't that then prevent us from advocating for things in action because of the term Ubuntu? Let's be humble, it's okay, we will get there. Where else our faith leader kicked the systems. I thank you.
Brother, what's your name? Dewo. Okay. Dewo. Okay. Thank you for that question. As a Muslim, from my tradition, we believe in the servant leadership approach of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also we believe in sabr, which is patience in times of tragedy and calamities and things like that. So I'm going to open it to the floor to the colleagues here to talk about Ubuntu and give your perspective. So is there anyone from South Africa who would like to address this question first? Because I think, Brother Muhammad, you should be able to address it. I know you're not from South Africa, but I think in terms of...
From the bigger Africa.
Yes, exactly. So can I ask you to respond to that before I take another question?
Yeah, sure. So, my brother, the whole Africa was called Sudan, right? The entire African continent. And I'm originally from Sudan, right? But just to answer your question, maybe this is my own perspective. Sometimes for us as a communities to move forward, we have to overcome some grievances. We should not be imprisoned for the history, right? To move forward. So we have to come to a term how we can overcome grievances, how we can, yes, we need to acknowledge what happened, but we need to have a bigger room for progress and development and thinking how to do that. At our diverse theology actually calling for that. This notion of afu, right? Forgiveness, is in our various traditions. You find it, if I ask somebody today, we ask you if you are a Christian, give me some verses from the Bible talking about forgiveness. You'll be able to do that. The Muslim here will do that. I'm pretty sure from the Sikh, from the Buddhism, from all traditions, we have all of that. And why it is forgiveness, basically? It is forgiveness so that you can have a room to move forward and to focus on what is actually good for humanity as a whole. That's exactly the point. So Ubuntu here in South Africa you have, it is the term that I believe that is used to help the community to reconcile, to work together, to reach to that point of reconciliation and solidarity. So that's why let's take the positive connotation of the terminology itself and move forward with it. This is my own opinion.
Thank you so much, Brother Muhammad. I'll take another 2 questions now. My brother here and Sherry? Yeah. So the brother first? Yeah.
All right.
In the next round, yeah.
Thank you so much. My name is Rampe Hlobo. I'm a Jesuit priest, originally from Soweto, based in Nairobi now. Just on the concept of Ubuntu, I think it was not explained properly, especially on the notion of humility. Ubuntu, it emphasizes on that interconnectedness of human beings, and in this case with nature as well. So that's the most important thing. And humility, yes, it's part of Ubuntu. In your language, you would say Botho, which refers to the fact that as human beings, we relate to each other in a way that is mutually respectful and for the well-being of all of us as a community and the rest of God's creation now in this context. So it's not about subjecting yourself to injustices. The humility that Ubuntu talks about, it's about being humble so that we can grow together, not being humiliated, because there's a difference there. It's not about humiliation, it's about being humble so that as a community we can work together, grow together, and work for the common good of all in the context of the social teaching of my church.
Wonderful.
So it's
Brother, do you have a question?
Pardon?
Do you have a question, brother?
No, I just wanted to react to that.
You want to? Okay,
yeah,
you want to
okay.
correct that.
Yeah, so that it becomes clear that Ubuntu, it's not about subjecting ourselves to injustices. We have to be firm against injustices. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you so much. Sherry, over to you.
Yes, Sherry Steiner from the United States. I realize that this is a place for voices from Africa, but the reconciliation and moving forward and emphasizing forgiveness to create space for moving forward based on historical grievances makes sense. But what about the present ongoing abuses that are happening? How do we listen to the voices of Africa without addressing the ongoing oppressive injustices of countries like the one I am living in, the United States, where we're not yet buying into the non-proliferation treaty of the fossil fuels? We're polluting, we're leading in many ways the international economy in directions that are still raping the earth.
So I'd like to ask Marilyn and Mushra to respond to the comments about Ubuntu and also Sherry's comments as well. Just, you've got 30 seconds, guys.
I'm going to comment on the concept of Ubuntu. My favorite quote is from the poet Rumi that says, yesterday I was clever and I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise and I'm changing myself. So Ubuntu means, in direct translation, I am because we are. And I think to be a true, strong, and unified Ubuntu, we must focus on the I. I am because we are. And if I am wise and not wanting to be clever, if I'm a contributor, if I serve, if I lead from example and from faith-based values, then the Ubuntu will be stronger and more unified. And I think that's where we need to start, with I.
I think for me, in terms of Ubuntu, I just like to give an example of Nelson Mandela. He's been through a lot in his injustice, going through apartheid, right? And he had the opportunity to not forgive. But in that moment of forgiveness, it led to the democracy of the country. So we have opportunity to, it's a choice. We forgive, and it doesn't mean that we have to be acceptable of the injustice, but it means, as said, having patience, but moving beyond that for the forward progress of the community and the society. In terms of the ongoing injustice that are going on, society is so complex. There's so many layers to it. And we have a choice to say, do we drown in the negativity and the injustice and the stuff that go on? Or can we look towards the positive and solutions and what can we do together? And this is where I love grassroots initiatives, because that's what they can do. And I believe, they say small steps to change. The little steps we do, each one of us do in our communities, no matter what country it is, whether it's Africa, USA, whatever, it creates that positive vibe and that positive energy, and it creates that solutions. But it starts with us first. And it starts with mobilizing and partnering.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. I want to give my sister an opportunity here at the back to ask a question. Can we give her a microphone, please? Do you want to put your hands up because he can't see you?
Oh, sorry. He was in the front.
Thank you so much. My name is Tapela Banda. I am from Zambia. I also studied theology, but my work is really focused on the marginalized groups. As we discuss theology and advocacy, for me, my understanding is theology, we focus not only on one religion, but all the religions that we have. My question is, how can then theology, or rather all the religions that we have, support the marginalized communities in terms of the challenges that we have? Hearing from all the conversations and questions that we've asked so far, I haven't heard anyone talking about the marginalized groups, mostly which are the young children, the women, and the youths with disabilities. Why are we leaving them behind? Looking at the 2030 agenda, which says let's leave no one behind, but the discussions are not actually including them. Thank you so much.
That's a really important question, and I'd like to give it to my sister Azmira to answer that, please.
Thank you very much. That's exactly what we do at the Faith Forward Coalition. We've demonstrated a different way of working with stakeholders, and I can go on and on about this, but the short notes are, our program has at its core interreligious and intercultural dialogue. We understand that we need to be humble and learn from the stakeholder group that we are uplifting for more ambitious environmental policy. Through that, mutual respect, social cohesion, listening with the intent to support the groups that are part of our network is at the core of what we do. We open the door to groups that are able to engage in the formal UN process and those that cannot. For that very reason, where we say, we know that faith communities represent vulnerable communities, women whose voices are not effectively uplifted and heard, especially at the global governance level or within faith communities. And we say, come to the table, share these experiences. Because when you have that space of respect, mutual learning, you have peer-to-peer support. One group that perhaps has a voice at the table through the formal accreditation process will lift up the experiences that they have heard in this global convening. For example, the Interfaith Working Group on Pollution that are currently hard at work on the margins of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastics. They're made up of groups like Tear Fund, the Green Anglicans, the Bahu Trust. All of them have stories from the grassroots level, for example, on the rights of waste pickers, how faith groups are working hand in hand with waste pickers with no social protection, but rely on this broken system of plastic recycling and waste dumping for their livelihoods. They've taken those stories to the global level. The process has stalled currently, unfortunately, but that's the truth. We're coming to the end of INC 5.2, where we were supposed to have a legally binding treaty addressing plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. What are faith groups doing? They've said they've acted with conviction, and I can say that confidently, where countries have said, we don't want to cap the production of plastics. And I'll pretend I can't see that camera's red light recording me right now. Faith groups have come and said, no, this is important. We've seen this in our communities, and you must include a cap on plastic production. The treaty may or may not include that terminology, but again, they're saying through our institutions and mechanisms, we will work to ensure that at least we are not part of the problem and move to responsible operations. That's just one example of the Interfaith Working Group on Pollution. We have one on climate and biodiversity, and we see a range of traditions come together to share their good practice and take local stories, working with partnerships at the national level and take that to the global level as evidence of the change from an institutional perspective.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you so much, Asmira. If you could pass the mic to Grace, because I'm going to stop questions from the audience now and ask a few more questions to each of my panelists. I think, Grace, what I would like to ask you is how can local voices from women and youth in climate-impacted communities be elevated and heard in international arenas like COP? We've got the COP coming up in November this year in Brazil. So over to you, Grace.
All right. Thank you so much for that brilliant question. I think it's also going to address part of her question. I'll give you an example from my own country where I'm coming from. We have a community whereby most men, they tend to leave the communities and come here to South Africa to work. They leave the women behind. And when these men are working here, the money that they send to their communities doesn't go to the wife director to take care of the kids. Instead, the money goes to the family. Once they have taken the part, what is remaining, that's what goes to the woman. It's a trend in a couple of districts in Malawi. So instead of putting women as a vulnerable group of people, we can learn something from them. In what way? How do these women, despite all these challenges, they are facing the climate change, their men have left, how are they still managing to take care of the whole family? We can learn from them. So as part of my group, what we do as well, we also conduct a research. And one of the research that we are doing is to take these lessons and bring them on the table. I'm so grateful that I'm coming back again to South Africa during the agenda conference, CIJA, which is happening in October. And I'll be sharing some of these lessons that we are learning from the communities. So when you ask me how can we elevate, we needed to decolonize as well the issues of research. We rely much of the global north, but as the people of the faith, we can also publish our own work and share it on the global platform like Gender Conference, which has got more influence. In addition to that, amplifying supporting the grassroots communities, because these are the implementers of the activities on the ground. We can also support them with the resources, because one of the things that also limit like youth is the issue of resources. So these are just the ways that I can also contribute. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If I can come to Mushra, Women in Carbon is a global initiative. What role does it play in ensuring inclusivity and faith has a visible role within net zero?
Thank you for the question. So, Women in Carbon advocates for the representation and participation of women from diverse backgrounds, including those from different faith communities. I'm Muslim. I was able to start a chapter because I felt that there was a need in South Africa. And they open up this invitation to all countries globally. If you're interested in reducing carbon, if you work in the legal, digital, financial, accounting space that can contribute to GHG reductions, you are welcome to start a chapter, rally your troops, and form an Ubuntu in your country. So the initiative was started to empower, amplify, and increase the voices of women within the carbon industry, voices which may have been traditionally underrepresented in the field. So the South African chapter of this initiative has been built on 4 pillars: mentorship, which includes reverse mentorship. As Marilyn has stated, I don't know better than you, so we are also mentored by the youth and youth leaders. Education, networking, and activation. What activation means is we don't just talk, we do. We look for funding, we look for grants, etc. So I'll give you some stats on why this initiative is important. Climate change adversely affects women more than men, as you all know. 70% of the 1.3 billion people living in poverty are women. Women play a key role in driving change as consumers, workers, political, business, and faith leaders. Women drive 70 to 80% of all consumer purchasing decisions, thus leading the transition to a more sustainable lifestyle. Research shows clear linkages between women's leadership and action to tackle climate change. Women in Carbon exist to create a more inclusive and impactful transition to a net zero future and facilitate a more holistic approach to sustainability. It plays a crucial role in bridging the gap between gender equality, inclusivity, faith-based values, and sustainability goals.
Thank you so much. That's really exciting. Afterwards, tell me how I can join. And I don't know if many of the ladies here, women here would like to join. So I want to go on to Emmanuel. Emmanuel, what role can interfaith collaboration, because we've spoken about faith collaboration, faith meaning each of our faiths and how we're working, but what role can interfaith collaboration play in tackling environmental injustice across Africa? Over to you.
So the interfaith collaboration can play a very key role when it comes to addressing environmental injustices, whereby in each of the faith traditions we share common values. Like there are common values that we share, that is care for the environment, compassion, and justice. And by working together and bringing together all different faith communities, this can ensure that we are able to hold accountable various stakeholders, that is the government, that is the different stakeholders that are addressing various issues. And for example, this has been evident, however, there's a slow progress where in the African Union there's an interfaith group that brings together various faith leaders, and also there's inclusion for 2 representative young people from various faith communities. And however, there's need more to institutionalize it and to make it be part of like a division, and to ensure that there is good coordination of work, and also to ensure that their reportings, because most of the times the faith institutions reach out to various and local places where sometimes the government does not reach, and maybe other NGOs. And so through that, they should be able to report back to the continental body, that is the African Union, and also to their various governments, and also to ensure there's coordination, and to ensure also to hold everyone accountable, which is going to be easier, and also to ensure that there's no overlap, because if a certain faith institution is doing something and another one is doing something, and there's no that coordination, it's going to be a bit difficult on handling such scenarios when it comes to holding people accountable, especially on issues to do with environmental injustices. Yes.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for that. Now, on this panel, we have intergenerational panel here as well. So what I want to ask Marilyn is, how can we build stronger partnerships between elders and youth in climate and peace work?
Okay, that's a good question. So it's about inclusivity and not leaving either or out of the space. So the older generation, they bring wisdom, they bring experience. The newer generation brings passion, creativity, and innovation. And if that two combine together, you have a beautiful recipe for more productive work. So I think both voices should be equal and should be heard and be incorporated. And I just want to give a very quick example of my experience. We had a Religions for Peace Mandresa conference, and we had to create a pact. And this pact was supposed to be taken to governments for advocacy. And so we were brought at a table. There were youth there, there were senior religious leaders, there were government officials, and we all worked together around the table creating this pact. There was no hierarchy, there was no ego, there was no I know better than you. We all were listening to each other, we were supporting each other, and we created this pact together that formed the conclusion out of that conference that now we could mobilize in our communities to approach our municipalities for greener cities and more sustainable cities. So it's important that both are included in all initiatives and both voices are heard and both sides are respected for what they bring to the table.
Thank you so much for that, Marilyn. Our wonderful producer, Romana, has been very kind and given us permission to have an extra 15 minutes because we started late, so we can carry on until 1 o'clock. So hopefully all of you can remain with us. So I just want to give two more of my panelists a chance to answer a couple of questions from me because I'm holding the mic. And then if the rest of you can start thinking about questions that you would like to ask, we'll open up to the floor again. We will start with David because I know you were in the first round, you wanted to ask a question. So Brother Muhammad,
Yes.
what role do traditional spiritual authorities, elders, imams, pastors, play in maintaining peace when national institutions are weak?
All right, thank you so much. I mean, this is very important questions. Let me make a couple of acknowledgements. Acknowledgement number one, that religious and traditional institutions, they have been there for thousands of years, and they will be here to stay. Political institutions, they come and go. When the political institutions and multilateralism fail to deliver, they turn to religious, traditional, spiritual institutions. That's acknowledgement number one. Acknowledgement number two, there is a clear track record of the services that is delivered by spiritual, traditional institutions. You can, talk about a number of examples in Africa, here in Africa and in other places in the world as well. These are the places where, humanitarian aid is delivered through houses of worships, right? Eradicating of poverty, hunger. And they do that because this is enshrined in their theological beliefs. So it's not for political reason at all. So these are acknowledgements we want to do. Now, I also want to mention that the SDGs, somebody mentioned SDGs. As you know, all SDGs and all countries are behind. I think the SG, Guterres was saying that I think only 12% is achieved, and we have only like 5 years to go, right? So all countries are behind. That's why we see the multilateralism now, they're turning, okay, what's wrong with this? Because the political establishment has failed to deliver because of the lack of partnership and collaboration and cooperation with those who have a direct connection with grassroots. These are realities. That's why there is a critical role for spiritual authorities to play. I was in Nigeria with the Amir of Argungu. The Amir was telling me, his Amir in Argungu has 5 million people. He said to me, 80% of cases, the court send them back to my palace and I resolve them. 80% of the cases. But I do not have resources even actually to archive all of these precedents. Right? I'm asking how we can archive this work. So traditional and religious and spiritual communities, they're doing a lot of work, but they are not fully resourced. And as Secretary Ban Ki-moon said in his report in 2012, which led to the creation of the network that I am leading now, he said the role and the potential of civil society, religious actors is underutilized. Therefore, we need to find mechanisms to continue to utilize this. We don't have, look into the World Bank now. We were talking to the president of the World Bank that, why you are not giving resources directly to the civil society and the religious community so they can do the work. They said, well, we cannot do that. We don't have the mechanism to do it. So we have to find the best way to find mechanisms to empower religious and grassroots communities to do the work. And they already doing it actually. And they have the resources, but when they get more resources, they can do it. Of course, we have our own criticism about, the inclusivity aspect of what these institutions are doing, but we can, be able to mitigate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes. To Asmaira. Asmaira, my question to you is, why is it important for religious leaders to show up at spaces like COP? Because my sister here, she was asking about marginalized communities. Because a lot of people see these as political and scientific. So over to you, Asmaira.
Thanks, Dr. Husna. That's a good question. I'll give you the example of COP26, where we had the very first Faith Pavilion, a space for religious institutions, leaders, and communities to gather and demonstrate the work that they've been doing to policymakers at the table. This was an incredible, incredible endeavor, but there were some areas of improvement that I want to highlight today. Religious leaders can't or won't or shouldn't show up and make very inspiring, very informed statements without the backing of their institutions. Because these institutions give life to the words that they are speaking in these spaces. And so you cannot have one without the other. You cannot have the voice without the implementer. And you cannot have a voice that is not inclusive of the youth, the women, and the many other underrepresented groups and communities within a religious community. So to demonstrate how we can have this multidisciplinary approach, the Faith Forward Coalition brought up this idea of councils. The Council of High-Level Leadership, the Women's Council, the Youth Council that Emmanuel spoke about and Grace is a member of, the accredited organizations to UNEA, which is the governance process, and the faith-based organizations that we further broke down into the climate groups, the nature groups, and the pollution groups. The leaders provide their high-level statements, their ambition, their inspiration. The faith organizations give life examples of how an institutional approach can be applied to that, has been, and can continue to work towards that ambition. The women challenge some of those statements made and the work done, saying, oh, we need a space in this respect or that respect. The youth come and say, as Grace said, we need financing, and how can your institution support us? And so we look at granular examples, really breaking down the issue in this scenario. Now, the coalition has demonstrated that that is possible, and I say that with the utmost humility because of the partnerships that we've had across the network. But this can be done at an institutional level, where religious leaders encourage this kind of dialogue and institutional structure. So speaking to that, when religious leaders show up, they do need the evidence, not only from faith groups, but NGOs, research institutions that they already have a relationship with, and bring all these examples and say, look, if the ambition is low with regard to this issue on climate mitigation, loss and damage, let us be the example that will further push you towards that level that we want to see. Secondly, the work doesn't start at COP or these intergovernmental meetings, it starts before. Who's at the decision-making table? Countries. Where do you, faith organizations, have the biggest impact? At the national level. So when you're going to these big processes, don't just show up and make demands and expect to see change. You instruct, I should say, through your partnerships at the national level and say, look, we're already working on flood, on the effects of the flooding that happened, for example, in Pakistan. And we have one faith organization that said, our partnership has demonstrated that this is the language we should see in the text on disaster risk resilience. Can we see that? This is the power that faith organizations bring to the table, but only if we coordinate, collaborate, work together, work through dialogue. And there's a lot of work that can be done, and the responsibility is on each of the organizations here to reach a hand out and say, how can I support you, Hindu organization X and Muslim organization X? Because I know that we're kind of working on the same thing. Peer-to-peer support and dialogue are essential.
Thank you so much, Asmira. So what I'd like to do is open up to the floor now, and I know David Munene, my dear brother, wants to ask a question. So can we have the mic brought to him, please? Is there anyone else who has any questions, if they can put their hands up? Okay. So the lady in the back, after David, if the mic can be brought to her, please. And that will be the last question, and then we'll be ending soon.
Thank you very much, Professor Husnain, for the excellent moderation and a wonderful panel. I'd like to acknowledge with a lot of humility and pride that this is the first very gender progressive panel that we have had in all the breakaways, and I really celebrate that. Secondly, the examples of Laudato Si and Mizan, all of us, and of course the Gita as well, calls us to personal ecological conversion. That's the foundation of it. So if any of them during their closing could give a practical example of a no that they have said that would have otherwise harmed the world. I'll give an example. In my organization, the Catholic Youth Network for Environmental Sustainability in Africa, we do not give business. For example, when you're offering any of these workshops and conferences, for, like our Laudato Si Youth Assembly, we do not give business to service providers who supply us with conference plastic bottled water as our own small contribution. Perhaps we can hear about the small practical examples, even at household level. I will not take a drink which is packaged in plastic. I will go for tin, and if it's not available, I was not created to take it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, David. The sister at the back, if you can stand up and tell us your name and then ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mirala Goldsmith, and I'm the co-founder of Jewish Earth Alliance in the United States. We're a grassroots group that mobilizes Jews across the country to lobby Congress for better climate policies. And I want to thank you for all the whole panel for all the wonderful, inspiring suggestions and programs that you described. But my question's for Asmira. You talked about preparing to be part of international meetings by working together on an interfaith level at the national level. And one of the problems that I've encountered as a grassroots activist organizing my community is that my own religious institutions at the national level do not prioritize the area of climate justice. They often have, like you said, the leaders make good statements, and in principle, they understand that our religion is directs us to work on these issues, but it's not a priority for them. They'll sign on to statements and perhaps support something that's being done at the grassroots level or in our communities, but they don't really prioritize being involved with advocacy. And I'm wondering if you have suggestions, or other people in the room have suggestions about how we can influence our own religious institutions to prioritize this area. It's called Jewish Earth Alliance.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is, as we're running out of time, 30 seconds to answer my sister's question. Yeah, thank you.
I'll answer David's as well, as much as I can. Have you heard of Adama? Adama is an incredible network that mobilizes financing from key institutions globally, and they are putting into practice with young people and organizations already working on things like marine conservation, on energy transition. I think you would benefit from a conversation with the team at Adama, and if you would like an introduction, happy to make that. David, there are incredible examples from around the world. I already wrote down Adama as a university network, putting into practice the principles of Judaism in the work that they do. The Bahu Trust, who have an eco-village in Tanzania that look at the poorest of the poor and how they can support them through environmental principles enshrined in Al-Mizan, as well as Quranic principles, building gardens of hope and to nourish the communities there. Eco Pesantren is a youth program in Indonesia. They work with young people, incorporating, again, the principles of Islam and educating them on what eco-Islam looks like. The Govardhan Eco-Village is a very concrete example of how you can have a small community that's completely off the grid. Education, practical operations, everything, and they're looking at that. So many different examples. SAFSI, for example, and the Green Anglicans doing an amazing job advocating in their local and national contexts for conservation, for the rights of waste pickers, as I said. Those are the seeds that Al-Mizan and Laudato Si are planting, and it depends on these institutions and organizations to realize what those teachings are, social Catholic teaching, Quranic principles, and apply that in their respective situations, because then you see that diversity. Diversity in nature, diversity within faith communities, and that's a beautiful ecosystem to nurture. And I've been very privileged to be part of the work that all our fantastic partners are doing.
Thank you so much, Asmara, for that. Now, in conclusion, what I'd like to ask each of my panelists is just to give us, because for me, I always look at the glass half full. I want to have hope. I want, as a person of faith, I have hope for the future, despite, the polycrisis that we're facing. We're not just facing a triple planetary crisis, we're facing a polycrisis. So what I'd like is one word of inspiration from each of you. And if you want to address David's question, you're welcome to do that. But each of you will have just 1 minute. So I'll start with Grace. Asmara, you've already spoken, so then Mohammed after that, please.
Okay. A practical example. Otherwise, it won't be recorded. Okay. A practical example from my own community, a grassroots level, is the encouragement of using manure and having a farm, a demonstration farm for local meetings to imitate. One of my inspirational words is that I feel like it's possible when we work together. In the rooms where the final decisions are made, if everyone is included, youth, vulnerable, women, and everyone elders, in those rooms, it's possible to achieve the common goal.
Well, thank you so much. Really, I'm just very hopeful that we continue to give the leadership to the youth. I think that's where we can make progress. And I think we are making progress, particularly in this forum this year. It's better than before, but it's not enough. So I think we just need to continue doing that, so that if that happens, then we're confident that we can resolve all the, poly crisis with climate and others. So I think that what I completely, and we have seen that demonstrated actually in a number of issues that we are addressing when you give it to the youth. In my own organization that I am leading, I am the oldest, right? So everyone else is like in their 30s or late 20s, and they're doing an amazing job. You need to empower youth. When you give them the possibility, empower them, let them innovate themselves. And I have seen it, right? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Muhammad. Marilyn?
So, just to address David's question, I think it's about challenging ourselves, being in the most uncomfortable space. For example, if I'm going to talk about climate change and interconnectedness with the earth, I have to practice what I preach. So I'm not a hypocrite at the end of the day. So it means, if I'm hosting an event, if I'm talking about these things, I've got to make sure I've got paper and paper cups. If I'm using plastic, I've got to take the responsibility of recycling that. If I'm going to talk about caring of the earth, I have to be vegan. Meat is it contributes to destroying animals. They are abused, and they are also add to climate change in terms of the global processes and the consumption of meat. So at the end of the day, it's just being uncomfortable and challenging yourself and being honest and sincere. So for me, it's like you've got to walk your talk, and you've got to not be less of a hypocrite, which is very hard. And then with regards to hope, I just want to say that, you look at the world, you look at social media, what's happening. There's a lot of despondency. There's a lot of negativity. And it comes back to where you stand in life in terms of your choice. And for me, I just see youth as the hope, as mentioned, because I've been engaged in so many organizations, so many youth I've met. They are on grassroots levels doing so much in their communities. They are taking leadership roles. And to just give an example, like the first day I came to this conference, I was with Ackway. And, just being in that space with that youth, it was just so inspirational and transformative, because the conversations, the engagement, it's just on a different level compared to the senior level when you're sitting in a space and you're just talking about problems and, you're trying to find the solutions. But that's why I say it has to be intergenerational, because the youth bring a different perspective. They are change makers, they are peacemakers, and they are the future and the current, and they are the agents of change.
To answer David's question and to add on what everybody else has already said, charity begins at home. Be the change. Start with recycling. It starts with the little things. Influence your kids, and they will influence their friends. And then it influences communities and countries. Then on words of inspiration, carbon projects and sustainability projects are based on two key principles, and that's the principle of benefit sharing and free, prior, and informed consent. So benefit sharing speaks to the view that those who are affected by carbon should benefit from its outcomes, and this includes access to job opportunities, improved infrastructure, enhanced environmental conservation measures. Free, prior, and informed consent requires that local communities are fully informed about the potential impacts of any project and can give or withhold their consent, and that their consent is obtained in a free and fair manner without coercion. This principle is important in recognizing the rights of those communities to self-determination and to protect their lands, resources, people, and traditional knowledge. So the inspiring words are, let us be governed by those two principles, whether in project, whether in character, that what we do must be of a benefit, and that it must have free, prior, and informed consent.
Thank you, Mushra. Emmanuel?
Okay, to answer David's question, one thing which I personally and the people who I stay around, I always tell them is when there are community outreach programs like town cleanups, we have to participate because if you don't do it, who is going to come and do it for you? So that is one way on how to address some of these issues and to ensure you do what is right and address. For example, I don't know the actual quote, but there's a quote which says, sweep, like when you're sweeping, you sweep to your end, then you collect it, and then someone else, they do sweep from their end, then they come and collect it. Because if you leave it there, who is going to come and collect it? So that's how we are supposed to view things and see it from that perspective. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. So we've come to an end, and I'd just like to give some concluding remarks. At COP30, as you all are aware, that will be taking place later this year in Belém, where my sister Romana is from, Brazil. The issue of loss and damage. The issue of loss and damage will be a test of our shared humanity. This is not just a policy term, it's about the irreversible harm already suffered by communities who did the least to cause this crisis. It means the washed away homes in the Pacific Islands, the farmland turned to desert in the Horn of Africa, the sacred burial grounds lost to rising seas. The fund for responding to loss and damage, first agreed at COP27, is now moving from promises to delivery. Under the Barbados implementation modalities, US $250 million has been committed for 2025 to 2026 to help countries recover from both economic and non-economic losses. This is a small step compared to the billions needed each year. But for a village facing famine after failed rains or a coastal community losing its ancestral land, it can mean survival. As people of faith, we know that justice is not an act of charity, it is a sacred obligation. The theology of Ubuntu and the teachings of Laudato Si and the Mizan remind us that when one community suffers loss, all of humanity is diminished. So COP30 must be the moment when the world chooses solidarity over silence. I'd like to thank my esteemed panelists who have just been I could listen to you all day. All of you are just amazing. I'm sorry that I had to, cut you. But I needed to make sure that everyone had a chance to speak. So if we can give a hand of applause for Grace, Asmaira, Mohammed, Marilyn, Mushra, and Emmanuel. I'd also like to thank the technicians, my two brothers who are at the back, and the videographer. And to our producer, Romana, and our note-taker who's been sitting quietly at there. So if we can thank all of them. And a special thanks to someone who's in the room, who's been behind the scenes being absolutely wonderful, Anastasia. If we can give a special hand for her. Thank you so much to the audience for spending time with us and your contributions. Thank you. Bye-bye.